Hey guys, welcome to another video. I'm stood here today in Red Square, probably the symbol of Russia for the whole world, to talk about something that I hear all the time. I hear it from people and I hear it and read it on the internet all the time, especially in the comments on my videos from Moscow. People always say to me, Johnny, if you've only been to Moscow, you've only seen Moscow, then you've never seen Russia. Well, actually, I have seen a lot of Russia and I've not only been to Moscow. But do I think this is true? Do I think that Moscow is not Russia? Well, I want to talk about it. And for the purpose of this video, Moscow also includes St. Petersburg for the most part. Not all of it, but the fact is that St. Petersburg is also a city which people from Russia say is not Russia. So, without further ado, I'm going to talk about it. Many Russians say that Moscow is not Russia for a variety of reasons, but the three main ones are really economical, mental, and for a certain extent cultural. And I'm going to talk about those three in this video and maybe add a couple of extra things too. So the first reason for why Russian people say Moscow is not Russia is of course economic. I'm talking about personal finances and wages. In Moscow, the average wage here is about 80,000 rubles a month. In the whole of Russia, that average wage is about 30,000. That's 2.5 times lower. This means that people in Moscow often have spare income. They often can travel. They can travel to different countries in the world where they actually have money to buy things. Whereas people who live in the provinces, they're struggling on 25, 30, 35,000 rubles a month. Once they've paid their rent, they've fed their kids and stuff like that, they don't have the money to go and travel to Europe or something. So that's a massive thing, but the economics are not only personal, it's also governmental and actually as a whole. The budgets of the Moscow city government compared to other governments, it's just a massive difference if you compare, say, Moscow city's government with an oblast close to, say, I don't know, Tver Oblast or Tula Oblast. It's just a completely different level. And people talk about this in terms of what they spend their money on here, and a fact that's often trotted out on the internet and by people not from Moscow, it's about Christmas decorations. You've seen on my videos how great the Christmas decorations here are in Moscow. Well, I've read online and I've heard from people those Christmas decorations per year cost about 3 billion rubles to put up, to maintain, to light, stuff like that. Well, 3 billion rubles is actually more than the entire budget of a couple of oblasts or krais, I can't remember which one, a couple of federal subjects here in Russia. So if you compare, here they spend more on Christmas lights than some places spend the entire year for everything. So you see there's a massive difference between the economy here, the budget for the government, and the same in other places. The second reason, in my opinion, why Russian people say that Moscow is not Russia is centralization. Everything in Russia is controlled by this building right behind me now, the Kremlin. As you can see, the famous tower here. All decisions are made here and in the parliament, the Duma, which is just a little bit 5 minutes down there. People from across Russia say that their local government has very little power and the Kremlin controls everything. And to be fair, it's very true. Russia is called the Russian Federation, but it's a federation really in name only. There's only a couple of republics that really have strong power, like Chechnya, for example. And most places are just controlled by the Kremlin. So that's one reason, it's centralization, how everything is controlled here, and other places have very little power. That's why they say Moscow's not Russia. In Russia we have no control, in Moscow they have control. But this centralization doesn't just extend to government, it also goes to business and stuff too. All the money and opportunities are here in Moscow, or to a certain extent St. Petersburg. If I give an example of some other countries, let's say Germany. In Germany you have the government in Berlin, you have the financial sector in Frankfurt, and you have big businesses in Bavaria, for example. BMW and Audi are based in Bavaria. So you have this, it's not centralized, it's a mix between everywhere. And another good example of that is America, where you have the financial sector in New York, you have the government in Washington, D.C., and you have the technology companies in California. Well, in Russia, everything is here. 90% of things are here in Moscow, and maybe you have 9% in St. Petersburg and 1% spotted around everywhere else. It's just the same in England, actually, where it's very centralized in London. So that's why people here in Russia say, look, you live in Moscow, you haven't seen the rest of the country. Moscow has the opportunities, it has the money and everything like that. Everything's centralized and controlled by Moscow. Whereas in other places, it's just the complete opposite. So yeah, the centralization is not only government, it's also opportunities, business, money, everything. So yeah, that's the second reason, centralization. The third reason for me why people from Russia say that Moscow is not Russia is mentality. Here in Moscow and also in St. Petersburg, people have a more European mentality than the rest of the country. They have a very Western-facing, European-facing mentality, and you can see that almost everywhere in the culture. You see here, you often find coffee shops, you often find European-style hipster burger bars and stuff like that, which do exist in other cities, definitely. But here, they're everywhere, and in others, they're a little bit more few and far between. And also, this idea of westernization extends into other sectors. So here in Moscow, you're much more likely to have a Facebook account than you are if you're from the provinces, where people there are more likely to have maybe an Odnoklassniki account, where everyone uses VK, that social network, but Facebook is also used here, where it's not outside. I have to say, in my opinion, this idea that Russia is more Eastern and Moscow and St. Petersburg are more Western is complete nonsense. I've visited many other cities and I've seen people in expensive cars and branded clothing sitting in their expensive coffee shops, the same as I see in Moscow. It's less frequent, but it's there and it exists. And I definitely wouldn't say that people here in Moscow have a European mentality. Maybe a little bit, compared to the rest of Russia, maybe a lot. But in general, the European mentality it's just not a thing. People here are definitely Russian. So personally, in my opinion, when I hear people from Russia say that Moscow is not Russia, it comes from a place of hatred. People say that Muscovites are gluttonous. They are snobby and proud and they look down on everybody else. And because of that, they hate Moscow, they hate Muscovites, and they say Moscow is not Russia, those people are not like normal Russians. Many Russians have told me that people from Moscow are buying everything on their credit card. They're buying things they can't afford, like a BMW or a nice apartment and the latest iPhone, and generally being gluttonous, while people from outside of Moscow can't even dream to afford those kind of things, especially from the provinces and outside other major cities. If I look closer to home and I look at London as someone who's not from London, I can understand why everyone says what they say. London has all the money, it has all the power, it has all the opportunities, and in fact, I'm just as guilty because I moved from my smaller town and I moved to London for university, for that lifestyle, that opportunity to make something of myself. So I understand the gripes of people from all over Russia when they say the same about Moscow, because I feel the exact same about London. So overall, in my personal opinion, do I think that Moscow is not Russia? Well, no, Moscow is definitely Russia. When I walk around here, I definitely feel like I'm in Russia. When I go to other cities, of course, I can feel the culture is a little bit different, the lifestyle is a little bit different, but Moscow is 100% Russia. It's just not time to open up a passport control on MCAD just yet. Since I'm not Russian and I don't want to mischaracterize what other Russian people say, I decided that after giving my opinion, I would go online and ask some of my friends on VK, ask my followers and different social networks like Instagram what they think. Why do people from Russia hate Muscovites, hate Moscow? Do they really believe that Moscow is not Russia? So I've asked a few and I got hundreds of responses. And now we're going to transport magically into my apartment and I'm going to show you some of the responses I got from real Russians. So you don't just have to listen to my opinion, you can hear the opinions right out of the horse's mouth. So I asked Instagram and VK for opinions and I got literally hundreds, and I thought the best option was to select the most liked and commented opinions on my VK page.
Most comments were supporting my opinion and view, especially my thoughts about economics, government, centralization, and perceived Moscow snobbery. I asked the question, why do most Russians from the provinces hate Moscow and Muscovites? This is the top comment from VK user Irina, and she wrote a very long comment. She says she's a provincial Russian who loves many things about Moscow like the energy, movement, theatres and history, but she makes an interesting judgment of the city as a whole. She says that Moscow is a cruel city and without acquaintances, connections or arrogance, you are a nobody. She says that Moscow is like an iron on an ironing board and people just get trampled over. She complains that people have no time for family and are always stuck in their cars, and people don't have time to enjoy their life in Moscow. I'll put a full translation of her comment in the description of the video. The second most popular comment comes from a user, Olga, who says that the main reason is wage, and the different wage for the same work. She gives the example of an engineer who can earn 25,000 rubles a month in the provinces, but 100 in Moscow. The third most popular is from Ekaterina, who says that people from the provinces are afraid to escape and do something different and prefer to sit around and complain. She says she used to be like that but moved to Moscow and realised that everything is great there. She also says that there's a big problem with self-esteem and envy, as many in Moscow have lots of success. The final comment I want to highlight is from Tatiana, who says that the comments about people from the provinces whining or moaning are unpleasant, and imagines a nightmare scenario where everyone in the whole of Russia tries to move to Moscow. Translations of all these comments are in the description below, and if you'd like to join the conversation, you can always find my page on VK.
Thank you very much for watching this video. If you thought it's interesting and you liked it, please press the thumbs up down there. If you want to see more, please subscribe. If you're new, please subscribe. And if you have thoughts or comments, please write them below. Thank you very much and goodbye.